Thank you so much for coming to my talk. This presentation has a lot to do with what this window period is about, and actually a huge portion of my life was really preparing me for this particular window period. And so when one looks at a resume, I just like to put life experience, because what better teacher is there than observing what goes on in our world? And so I paid a lot of attention to what was going on in my world and the things that were coming in, and got so into it that just school and everything else started to fade away, and it just became not as interesting as some of the things coming through that I definitely, paid a lot of attention to. And just, soul journey. So, I say realizing miracles. Sometimes, there's slides that I have, I'm like, okay, when did you write that one? I mean, miracles are like such a natural thing, though, and it's one of those words that seem like it's a very, special occurrence, and it's just such a rarity, but it happens all the time. We just have these incredible abilities that we tap into when we're really not locked into that matrix program, and when we really set ourselves free, we access these other levels of ourselves that show us that, spirit really does hold dominion over physical matter, and when we really allow that power to work with us, there's nothing that we can't really shift or alter. And sometimes it's not coming from ego and force. It just comes from intent. It comes from integrity, purity, and just, being, open to that greater power that our higher self is connected with. And so to me, this window period is about integration. This duality of higher, lower, masculine, feminine, dark and light. It just really, bringing those two together is incredibly important for that circulation of, source energy to come through, spirit energy. And so I noticed that along the way, just, crazy things like pulling money out of the ground when I really needed it. And even impressing my mother, who thought I was insane. And then I'm in the car with her and I'm like, stop the car. And I get out of the car and I just pulled $50 out of the grass. She's just like, what? She goes, not that I do that anymore, how we have abilities, lose abilities, and have, because wouldn't that be nice? Because my husband will see me walking around and goes, what are you doing? I'm like, just seeing if any money is going to pop up. So it doesn't happen all the time, but those moments that it does happen, it's those moments of like feeling really free, when there's no other junk swirling around. There's moments that when you really, really need it, something like that happens. And I actually did need it because the flight got canceled and I needed $50 to buy a ticket to correct it. And so, and I just know that that's something we all have. And I noticed it enough in my life to really take it seriously and begin to really study consciousness, or really research what is junk DNA really? What are these other levels that we have access to that we've been taught to negate or repress or block ourselves from? And it's really actually very, very natural. And I stumbled upon a clairvoyant institute. I didn't really intend on going. I was going to go to an herbal school in California. They didn't have enough participants. And I ran into these guys, and they really helped me to understand, how to really get a grounding cord, because I was not in my body. And they helped me to also understand that I was actually not in my body for about 20 years. They said, you haven't even been here. You actually died, and your kundalini has kept you alive, and you channeled things that were like you, that were similar to you. They were like your friends to run your body for you while you went off and cleared inorganic entities from wormholes. And I was like, what? I was like, okay, I'm going to sign up and take a class, because that is kind of what I've been doing, but I'm not going to tell anybody. Yeah, it wasn't a 20 and back. I haven't been in the secret space programs, but it's funny, 20 years. Like, I should have maybe done 18 to not confuse people. I should have been in the secret space programs. I was recruited to go off planet, but I was not in the secret space programs. Like, we hear some whistleblowers who I have researched, whistleblower testimony and research. But we all are a little out of our body, right? This window period that we're in is really allowing us to bring in the fullness. So I call it multidimensionally tasking. We're doing things we don't even realize we're doing. And I give readings to people, and there's parts of themselves that are off doing things that consciously they're not even really aware of. So in realizing this, I was noticing like, wow, we're all doing crazy energy work, and we're really, trying to do things in the same way that we would want to take care of our physical bodies. But our physical body is only in like one-dimensional level of the rest of all that we are. And so we have to do energy maintenance in other realms besides this one. And we do it without realizing, because we are clearing the way, we are bulldozing through the density in order to be able to have that direct connect again that we've been manipulated out of. So this has been a lifelong thing since I was a kid. So a lot of realizations and epiphanies along the way, particularly the catalyst of being in the family I was born into. It was just sort of like, how and why? And so a lot started to come through about just things playing out on the world stage, things connected to hidden agendas and things that humanity has been kept from. And Eisenhower was always, just really like right there. And when I first went into the Clairvoyant Institute, they said, Eisenhower's here. And I was like, whoa. I'm like, these guys definitely are seeing stuff. Because I always a little skeptical, and I'm not saying that every single person there was clear seeing, but enough were. And I went up to them, and I'm like, yeah, I'm related to him. They're like, yeah, he came in the door with you. He's with you, like he's helping you, and he's your spirit guide for some of the stuff that you're doing. And I was like, whoa. And they're like, you've been a guide to him before too. And I'm like, okay, well, I take that with a grain of salt, but maybe. So anyway, my education, though, I trained in wilderness expedition leadership, and that was my ultimate teacher. It wasn't so much that I was going to take people out on expeditions, but this is when I really thrived, and I realized I can get good grades because I got terrible grades. And I had all the projections of learning disabilities and ADD, and I joke, attention on different dimensions. But it's hard. You don't just break free of those stigmas right away. I mean, I still carry them, even though I know I have, my mind works. But, when it starts off young, we all know sometimes it's hard to let go of some of those things that people throw at you. So, so the wilderness background stuff I did for a couple years. 30 below to 110 degree, deserts and snow. So I'm going to the Adirondacks next week, where I trained in 7 million acres of protected wilderness right on the New York-Vermont border. So I haven't been there in over a decade. Isn't it fun when you get older and be like, 20 years ago? It's like, well, I'm like one of those people now. Haven't been to the Adirondacks in a really long time, but I'm going to go there for a week with my father. Really excited about that. That's where I did some of the training. And yeah, just trying to connect dots with other whistleblowers, doing a ton of research. And I was always into mythology and understanding archetypes. And I've been doing tarot for like more than 20 years. And I just picked up astrology, and it ended up being something that I just do for people. But I use it as a map to help to bring people into the 0 point, to understand these patternings so that we can actually be liberated from it and find the higher octaves of the planetary consciousness and aspects, so that we're not like on this loop and constantly looping. And so it is a great tool to help us to kind of get to the next level, because obviously there's more planets than the ones that we see. And we have lots of asteroids that represent different archetypes. And so I just like to use it as a map to find the center of that wheel and graduate from the time loop, the wheel of necessity. And so Lisa Renee's been a good friend over the years, and we've put our heads together quite often. And she's got a really profound Ascension glossary and an excellent website. I recommend it, energeticsynthesis.com. I've dabbled, in studying Keylontic science a little bit. Like I'll have like a download or an idea, and then I'll Google it and see, does anybody else agree with this? Am I the only one? Well, obviously not. I'll find, information, and a lot of times Keylontic science and the Ascension glossary would come up when something would come through. And then I would read some of what, they said, and I would, kind of get goosebumps and sort of connect dots. But I don't really read books. I just kind of bounce around and just kind of thread different things together. But it's very hard for me to actually read a book from front to back. I've probably read like 5 books in my life. It's like, oh, right, why don't you tell everybody how much you can't really read? But I mean, I can read, but I like to see what's coming through, and then kind of like a quilt, like, connect dots. And don't get me wrong, if I'm on a bus long enough and a plane long enough, I can, get through a full book. And there are a few, like The Mayan Factor by Jose Arguelles, one of the few books that I was able to read from front to back. And I love how it connected dots between the I Ching and the Mayan calendar and the Venus transits and stuff like that. So, I mean, I have read a few books, so I'm going off on a tangent, obviously. So I like to start from the very beginning, not because I have it all 100% correct, but I like to just put the attention on every individual and how you experience this in your own way. But just to give enough to give somebody to, give us all something to go on. to just sort of like, how does that relate to you, and where can the activation come in for, you know, anybody who is, you know, listening. And for anybody to say they have the absolute and total truth would be, you know, sort of ridiculous, because we all experience reality in our own way. We all have our own concept of truth. There's multiple timelines and dimensions and experiences. Brad Johnson or Adronis was talking about, you know, the Mandela effect and how things are happening simultaneously, and it's not just one solid, factual, linear history that we're dealing with. So this, through kind of like muscle testing and feeling into the information, is about as close to what feels activating for me, in hopes that, you know, it could be activating for others, to just experience it in your own way. So just take what resonates, of course, and just discard whatever doesn't. But from what I've come to understand through my research and just tapping in, definitely the world was far less dense than it is today. And when we dealt with galactic wars, cataclysms, and the collapse of the higher dimensional civilizations caused by exploding planets that rapidly changed, we were dealing with abuses of free will, hybridization, and the manipulation of incarnate consciousness, and then our DNA. So it has made it very difficult to maintain a multidimensional embodiment and connection to spirit because of all that has taken place in our galactic history, while in physical form. In this profound window period, we have the opportunity to return to these higher planes of existence. So, you know, obviously we were a lot lighter. We had much more DNA capacity, 12-strand and beyond. And, you know, wars, cataclysm, trauma, you know, all these different things. And a free will universe that has given us the concept of ego, you know, caused us to step down. And to me, it's like a game of lost and found. You lose yourself, you find yourself. And all these different things that get in the way and get in the middle of it are just, you know, really, you know, kind of testing us. But the inevitability and something that can never be taken away from us is the fact that we can return. That option is always there. Like our immune system is always here. We might get really sick. We might die in a few lifetimes of something that our immune system wasn't able to tackle, but at the end of the day, it's still always there and available. Once we learn how to harness it and our creative power and work with it and enhance it and illuminate it, it begins to, you know, assist us. When we're always in the battle mode of fighting something, you know, it can just keep us in that loop of it comes, it goes, it comes, it goes, but the consistency is lacking. So there are natural cycles when the stargates open called a stellar activation cycle. And we're currently in this window, and that is why many talk about ascension. And so basically the geophysics of the planet is such where the stargates are able to open because the planetary body is in alignment with the galactic plane. And the galactic plane or core has a lot to do with Andromeda and Milky Way becoming one again. When they separated, we lost a huge portion of ourselves, our connection with our galactic chakras and parts of our energy body. So this window period is very much like after all these cataclysms and all these traumatic things in our history, it's sort of like physical therapy. Like when we go through trauma or an accident, it takes us a while to get back, get our equilibrium back, get our self mended, and the same thing in our creation with this particular, you know, planetary body, and of course other planets as well that impacted just how we relate to ourselves because of fragmentation due to exploded planets. We're now in a place where, you know, we're kind of like leaving the physical therapy office, like I can walk. Like now, you know, it's like open again. But then these other things are trying to come in and dupe us into thinking that what's possible is not really possible. So it's a really profound window period. And since I was a kid, I was being kind of prepared. And I wouldn't say, you know, did a bunch of aliens show up and prepare me? I did have a few dreams of some benevolent type beings that had me look through a viewfinder to understand timelines and understand what would be at stake if I ever left and went with whoever who wanted me to go off planet, which was really great to hear Adrona say, don't go on the ships. Because when I was recruited to go off planet, they made it sound like a really nice thing. Like, this is for your protection. We'll give you this position of power. I'm like, BS, BS. There's just, no. I'm here to be on Earth. I'm here because I know about this planetary body. I feel very close to this planetary body. I know what my mission is, and there's just no way. So it wasn't even a question. And so they just sort of reinforced that because, just in case. But, you know, to me, it's just, you know, these benevolent beings are connected to our own higher self. And just, you know, we have our experiences that can represent those, you know, parts of ourselves that are really looking out for ourselves or all that. So if we kind of start from the beginning, and again, take it with a grain of salt, but through a lot of research and kind of bouncing around different viewpoints from all sorts of researchers and whistleblowers. When we were in the cradle of Lyra, that's when we had 12-strand capacity. That was dimensions 10, 11, 12, when we were able to hold an avatar consciousness. When the cradle of Lyra was destroyed in the Lyran Wars with the Draconian Orion group, this is when the destruction of the avatar higher level of consciousness took place. The Orion group are a predator force with a predator mind, which is mainly responsible for creating much of the negative ego in humanity through mind control programming. Higher races were seeded to eventually win the war over this, but have been heavily targeted, as we see in the world today. So we are that race, right? So, I mean, that's why we're picked on. We've been manipulated, we've been dumbed down, we've been taught to think that we're a lot less than we are. But in a way, it's also helping us to learn the right use of power, because we see that those that have been given a position of power sort of run wild with it, just like the Ring of Power in the Lord of the Rings. It's kind of like, you know, maybe we needed to just be completely, you know, brought to our knees to really just understand, you know, power is a responsibility. And if we're not in the right use of power, we are subject to predator forces using us and manipulating us into these false promises of, oh, fame and fortune, if you like stand up for our agenda or serve our agenda, we're going to give you this and these advanced technologies, and you'll get this particular thing if you know, serve this agenda. So power isn't really anything without the integrity, without real alignment with spirit. So this is just a part of the free will universe of experiencing power, and we all have a choice of how do we want to, you know, use that power. And so, okay, well, who's this Draconian Orion group? Well, not to keep referring to him, but Adronis was talking about this and the Orion system and how pure it used to be and the infiltration that took place and how they sort of manipulated the beings to be raised to serve this particular agenda. And so if we look at a free will universe and the differentiation of the masculine and feminine, when that imbalance took place, it almost opened up a portal for a warring race to come in to take advantage. And that's what happens in our own life when we're out of balance. It's very easy to attract predator-type forces if we're not strong in who we are, if we don't know who we are, if we're not balanced, if we're not aware, if we're giving our power away, if we're making it about what somebody else tells us to do and how to think and how to be. We're really an open vessel for all sorts of things to come in. And so part of our growth right now is to really get back to what it means to be sovereign, what it means to be authentic, but most importantly, what I feel is what it means to have integrity, what it means to be an honest person that is not out to harm, not out to create energetic pollution, not out to manipulate for the sake of these false so-called, you know, benefits that might just be like money and power that expires. And that's why they rely on dark technologies, and their life cycle is through, you know, things like abduction and how to make up for those choices, because it doesn't sustain itself. It loses connection. So the higher races, which are us, I mean, there's lots of higher races. I mean, we're multidimensional beings, so there's a lot of different levels of this. But this new race was seeded to protect the time matrix from being totally destroyed. And that's what they're making sure that we don't discover within ourselves. So if we look at Harmonic Universe 4, the 12th dimensional blueprint, 10, 11, 12, Christ mind, Buddhic mind, avatar mind. And if you look at all the different sort of things that go along with that, that's a pretty high level of embodiment, the avatar matrix. And so 10, 11, 12 dimensions corresponds to our upper strands of DNA. So when we're in our full 12-strand capacity, we're able to experience that expression. But it kind of gets screwed up when it blows up, planetary explosions. So we are vulnerable, right? In the highest of dimensions, we are vulnerable to a race coming in there, right? So I asked the question, kind of knew the answer. I wanted to hear what he had to say. We all have our own answers anyway. You know, what happens when we move to 4D? You know, and then we keep taking steps up. We were attacked when we were all the way up there. Well, a lot of it has to do with the 13. That has to do with the mother and not losing connection with the mother, which is a huge thing about why this planetary body was created in the way that it's created. So we are vulnerable even in this high capacity of DNA potential or embodiment because free will and fallen races and competition and war and just the imbalance beginning to bring in these warring races kind of like just through us, completely through us, and we started to step down in dimensional levels. So differentiation of the masculine and feminine and the fallen founder races who seeded life in this time matrix created a disturbance in the higher dimensional energy fields. The angelic wars ended when there was a near destruction of the time matrix. Supposedly, from my research, the seraphim was the first to fall, and then the Elohim, and then the creation of the demiurge begins a more densified world of form. The Milky Way branched off from Andromeda, and we lost connection to the core heart of creation. And our ascension is the return to this. So we hear about the 7 chakra system, but we don't really understand that there's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and more. And as far as DNA goes, we're only functioning at like a 2-strand level or 3-strand. So what has supposedly been destroyed has only gone dormant. You can't destroy these sort of things. But you can scramble the fire codes, you can scramble things, you can put things in reversal codes, you can mess with the sacred geometries, so that the osmosis that we get when we're born into all this is picking up distortions. And they actually manipulated the earth grids too, and did things and tinkered with certain power places on the planet and the earth grid so that we would just naturally, through osmosis, be picking this stuff up. And so we just think we're a bunch of, screwed up humans and like, okay, we're just sinners and we'll go to church and like, sorry, Jesus and everybody. But we don't realize it's not just us being bumbling human fools. There's a lot that's trying to screw us up. And we can be pretty idiotic on our own terms too, but it's good to meet it a little bit halfway and understand that there's a lot more working against us than just us screwing up and making mistakes and just being. So there's a bit of manipulation, of course, in certain religions, and I don't want to. I think there's a good place and a good intention in some of them, and a lot of people gravitate towards that part of it. But then there's an underbelly, there's a dark side too, and that happens if we give our power away too much to anything. It ends up kind of biting us for a reason. It's just same thing with politics or anything else. If we give too much to something, eventually the disclosure is going to show us there's crimes against humanity. There are people that are just out to make sure that that's exactly what we're doing so that they can harvest our energy so that they can be in power. And so that's where, most of the manipulation comes in, is to make us small, dependent, and to use all these tactics to keep us in that state, to keep us in survival, to keep us really powerless and afraid of the future. So anyway, it was the emphasis of ego that led to the first fall in this free will universe that the Christ Sophia within us redeem, because now we would have to experience the world of more densified matter, since ego substance is different than the spiritual worlds. Soul is what we come here to experience on our free journey, or our journey of free will, as it is what enables our alchemy and our return home. So, again, experience that for however that makes sense to you. But when I say Christ Sophia, it's like, okay, names and labels can be difficult for people, but it's the masculine and feminine, really. It's that template that we all hold within ourselves. And it's not even so much about gender. It's the electric, it's the magnetic, it's the right, it's the left, it's the energy field around our body. It's circulation that runs through our own personal grids, our energy lines that the Chinese medicine understands. And that's why when we have energy blocks and we maybe get acupuncture, it helps that flow of energy to integrate the right and left. But if we look at it, which I like to do, in terms of a love story, then we're not just battling a bunch of demonic forces, we're actually experiencing this incredible love story. And so the actual rebuilding and awakening of our dormant DNA, we can look at as a love story, that we're creating this reunion of true love between the masculine and feminine within ourselves, and that whatever has gotten in our way is an imposter. It's like a terrible husband or stepfather, just something that, a narcissistic boyfriend or girlfriend that you're just like, what am I doing with this person? Why am I even paying attention to the system and these things that are draining my life force and cheating me and betraying me? So we give it the benefit of the doubt. We can get the red flags that something's wrong, but then it's like you check the text message. You're like, who the hell are you texting? It's like, I know. And then you're like, oh, I trust you. I don't look at your phone. So that's another tangent. But if you really have enough red flags, maybe people do that. I personally don't look at your phone, but I guess what I'm trying to say is we have enough red flags with certain things that are going on in our world that it causes some of us to look a little deeper and understand, like, whoa, it's a lot maybe worse than any of us could have been prepared for. I was prepared a lot in my life for a lot of this kind of stuff, but I don't think any of us least not me, has ever been able to be prepared for the level of abuses and crimes against humanity that actually do exist. So the good news is, even though that's horrific, is we only have ourselves to fall back on. And that means that nothing outside of us is really, really working. And even what seems like safe communities aren't always very safe. So, and I love talking to Jason, because I'm sorry if I'm making you uncomfortable, but we need to learn how to fall back on ourselves and trust ourselves a little bit more. Even if it means we go through the dark night of the soul, even if it means that we feel completely blasted out of our ability to even function as a human, I mean, so be it. Sometimes we and I kind of say this a lot, we can't call into work and say, I'm going into the underworld for a couple months. Is that okay? It's like, can I have a leave? It's like, no, you have to be sick, you have to be dying, you have to have the flu, you have to be in the hospital, you have to get a doctor's note. But it's like, excuse me, I'm going through an initiation to upgrade my DNA and like clear ancestral patterns. It's like, that doesn't, you know, it's like you're either fired or you quit. So I quit, and I lived on the road for a while, and I gave myself the time and the space to go into that zone. As awkward and uncomfortable and gnarly as it was, no matter who I lost, no matter who thought this or what, I knew that I would not be able to continue without going into the trenches and really going into the dark zones. And so I like to give a voice to it because we fear it. It destabilizes us. It makes us feel, you know, like, how can we talk about this comfortably? It's usually something we're ashamed of, when we should be so proud of ourselves for being willing, because it might make us feel sick. We might feel like we want to die. We might feel like we're just grabbing onto anything for dear life. But if we feel comfortable with these initiations, we can be a little bit more comfortable. And even though we can't do it for each other, we can at least validate the journey and hold space for one another with love and compassion and support, because it's a very important journey that we all take. And then the density begins to lift, because we're not in the polarization of light and dark, where we're just running to the light because we're afraid of the dark, or we're pissed off at the light because whatever was teaching us the light was actually false. And then people say, oh, well, you know, that's why I just went to the dark side, because the light's bullshit. Well, it's like, what about our own light and dark? Why are we always reaching outside of us to define things? We're made of this. The dark is the soil, it's the womb, it's where we plant seeds. The light is our higher consciousness that has all these ideas and visions for ourselves that we can co-create with these universal forces to begin to lift the veil that has been keeping us just locked into the personality matrix. So anyway, negative emotions, when reversed, are the 4 elements. And when we balance them with the inner masculine and feminine, we access the healing rays of creation, which is that miracle energy. And it's the infinite life force and light source of all that is. And so negative emotions, if they're the 4 elements, when we look at those elements, you got water. Well, what's the negative energy of water? Well, it can be depression, it can be toxicity, it can be what we see in our oceans, the radiation, you know, the pollution. And, you know, earth, the degradation of the environment, extinction of animals, deforestation, you know, these fires and weaponry that is like really harming the earth. And then we look at the air, it's like our skies are being sprayed, you know, mind control, the inability to be free thinkers. So all these elementals have been in reversals, and we experience them as negative emotions. And then fire element is the misuse of fire through like bombs and war, and then, am I missing any element? Earth, air, fire, water. So part of this ascension is to understand what contaminates the emotions, what contaminates the body, what contaminates the fire, our passion. What's the great contaminator of all these elements that exist within us? Well, mostly the negative ego and the negative ego constructs that are causing us to be addicted to the money system, to things that like really have no value at the end of the day, and things that don't look out for, you know, one another or ourselves. It's just out to compete and win. And that's why it's a 3D thing, because it's a personality matrix. Our self-worth depends on these things that we've been taught to feel good about ourselves. And so, and that keeps our world very dark and toxic. And we notice that, okay, well, why is everything like that? Well, because we're carrying a lot of that load and we're expressing that energy. And so it's, in a sense, you know, that's where I see the mirror mostly. And when we clear our inner elements, the earth has no choice to respond, because the nucleic acids of our DNA actually are elemental. And our soul energies connected to the different zodiac signs that we have an affinity towards are elemental. And so when we, you know, do that work, when we talk about, well, what is the inner work? A lot of it is to clear that contamination, to understand that the other side of depression is finding your deepest soul longing. if we look at it like, okay, well, why don't you want to get out of bed? Well, I ask myself that, like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, well, that's a little lofty. Really just gonna, just do all this stuff and talk about this and go over there and go to try and activate the Stargate and the 13th gate. Okay, whatever. It's like, you got to interview it. Like, so I got into a really big dialogue with myself. I was a little surprised at what was coming out, but it's just like, this is not something to be medicated. This is not something to think something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with this world. And I think it's a healthy response to the BS of this society and the desecration of all that's sacred, that we're gonna get a little angry and a little depressed and have our moments, right? Not to be medicated, but to be listened to and given respect. So that's, to me, how we begin to reverse the toxicity or the heavy density of these elements, is to really get inside of there and just ask ourselves the right questions. Work with people that help open us up to the deeper cause, right? If our fire element's off, if we're rageful and angry, well, we have a lot of passion we need to express. Well, what is that passion? We need to understand it. And once we understand it, then we are able to be authentic, we're able to do our mission, we're able to be free. And sometimes it's like, well, what am I here for? What's the purpose? I get a lot of clients saying that. It's like, just doing that is enough. I have no greater purpose than that myself. I just have a big mouth, and I'm tired of all the secrecy connected to the governments. And so I figure, okay, I landed in this family for a reason, because nobody's talking about UFOs or ET or government treaties. So there's my fire element, because when I was suppressing that, it was like, no, it was a life or death thing. It's like, you got to let this out. Okay. So the Draconian Orion group are also referred to as the Black Suns. The Black Suns have reversed their DNA. It is a reverse 10 DNA strand and running a reversal life current. We can activate 12 strands and beyond, but these reversal energies are trying to keep us from this because it just kind of feeds on it. So the less we allow them to feed, the more that they could probably actually maybe even shift. I mean, some talk about reptilians wanting to go to the light. Well, I'm not waiting around for it. I'm not looking for it. I don't need to okay, you guys figure it out, but we have our own work to do, and it will change the species that we're interacting with. Because, just like a relationship, if you don't have a receptor for them to plug into, they start to change. They're like, oh, okay, I can't control that person. I can't. So they either get bored and leave, or they're like, okay, wow, I'm waking, I'm just deprogramming from the patriarchal programming that has impacted both men and women. I'm not one of those people. I have so much compassion for what men have been through and the programming they've dealt with, and the fact that they've had to go to war and have their limbs blown off, and then women are acting like they're the enemy. I don't get that. Sorry. I have so much respect for the healing process that both sides are going through, because we have both sides in us, and we don't know who we've been or what we've done or what roles we've played. So I just think it's a group effort to come into harmony with all of us, and to understand that it hasn't been easy on any of us. And a patriarchal programming has nothing to do with the humans as much as it's something inserted into society to keep the imbalance alive, because as long as there's imbalance, the predators are able to rule. So anyway, they have a hierarchical system. Earth-based reptilians appear to be in command over like EBEs, or biological entities known as small grays. They access limited levels of biological immortality through the vampirism and siphoning of other living things, such as the planet Earth. And so when we look at like AI and transhumanism, it's all replicas and imitations, and it all just like harvests and uses energy. Most of these negative technologies would not work without having battery power of life force of other living beings. So if people, Google the Tree of Life, very often you'll find just a 10-sphere Tree of Life, which is actually the Draconian DNA, which is 10 strand in reversal codes. In actual fact, it's 12 spheres, and that's our 12-strand DNA. And if you look at the 3 founder flames, 13, 14, 15, that's when we go into what we hear about, like the Trinity. And again, just only take what resonates, just getting as close as I can. So the blue ray, the gold ray, and the violet ray. We've got aquamarine, pale gold, and magenta. The interesting thing about the blue ray and the aquamarine is that this is a part of the core of our planet. It's the sun within the planet. But it hasn't been able to maintain itself in the planet for reasons that I'll get into. But this is all divided up into different harmonic universes. We've got density 1, 1, 2, 3. This is kind of the 3D Earth. And then we've got 5D, and that's, Tara. where Tiamat exploded, 4, 5, and 6. So when we look at the numbers, it corresponds with chakras and DNA strands. So when we talk about like 5D, to me, like, well, how do we get there, and what's a good reference point for us to be able to say, hey, I'm moving into 5D? I think it's really about paying attention to your throat chakra, because your words can destroy somebody or uplift them and make their day. And we need to be responsible with our words. I mean, and I know like a lot of us are really sensitive. When you're on the phone with someone, you say, bye, I love you, and they just go click. You're like, oh, they don't love me. Or I mean, just the slightest thing. And it's just, somebody could just, just do something that just makes your week. Or they could say something that completely throws you out of your body for a couple days. I mean, and words can annihilate. And like really, like there's certain things that I just have to block. I can't read, because if I read, I'll leave my body. It's like I can't, it's like, and I try not to be so sensitive, but I mean, I'm getting a little better, but our words are everything. Our words are power. Our words initiate healing. When we speak good words to our bodies and ourselves, the frequency behind it, if it's connected with truth, that frequency is greater than all these distortions. So when we can push the envelope a little bit and not like speak the programmings that we receive and pass that virus on to others, that mind control, and spread it around and mistreat others and create those judgments and holier than thou kind of attitude or whatever, being a bully, whatever, it's the responsibility of the throat chakra. That's where the alchemy happens. We have so much power in our words because it's a tone. When we look at sound healing, we are sound healing energies. We could be standing next to each other, anybody in the grocery store, and if we just have a loving vibe, if we're really connected with truth, we could throw them in a growth period for a couple of weeks. They won't know what the hell hit them, and they'll just be like, they might see the world in a completely different light. So every moment of every day, we have the opportunity to bring in really beautiful energy and share that with each other. And if we don't, we're connected to like AI signals or some form of mind control, and we're just spreading it and sharing it, and we keep each other in lockdown. And that's why, we're in this 3D thing, because we haven't learned how to get our voices back, our truth back. And so 4, 5, and 6 is the Tara area, and we collapse down into the lower harmonic universe. But 7, 8, and 9 is more considered the Gaia. When we look at root races like Hyperborea and Polaris, that's more 7, 8, and 9, corresponds to chakras that go beyond the 7. And then 10, 11, 12 is where the Lyra, cradle of Lyra was, but above that, 13, 14, 15. The beautiful thing is 13, and I know numbers make it a little more impersonal, but the mother energy, which represents 13, started to participate in this planetary experience with this physical planet that we're on right now. So learning to travel consciously through the vibrational landscape of the tree of life is to travel through the multiple dimensions of time, and this is the personal pathway to achieve spiritual sovereignty and freedom. This is how we restore our DNA. We must bring consciousness to these dormant and asleep aspects of self and fully rise. Well, the first step really in this human form is the words we choose to speak to each other, the way we treat ourselves and one another. And once we get that going and we feel a sense of camaraderie and safety amongst one another, it's easier to thrive. It's easier to feel comfortable. I mean, how many people do you know, or even yourself, where you feel isolated? You can't talk to anybody about this kind of stuff. And that's because, there's a lockdown. There's a major disconnect. And it's like a bridge, our throat, just like our heart or whatever, and it starts to open up the rest. So once we have the right, use of words, especially we experience that in relationships, if it's a loving relationship, you can feel yourself begin to evolve with that person. You begin to see something of a much larger picture. And we can do that also without a partner, just by, understanding that the time that we can spend with ourselves is just as valuable, because we're in a relationship with everything. Everything that we, especially nature, everything that we interact with is a form of relationship. So if we break it up, dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, well, 3D Earth, we're not on a 3D Earth. The programming is a 3D program. And it's very much about the mind control, digression of humans, junk DNA, which is really not junk, loss of galactic memories. So when we look at junk DNA, oh, yeah, it's useless. Well, that junk is actually the chaos of lack of unity, lack of cooperation. And like, Adronis was saying, free will does not mean cooperation. That's a choice that we have. So if we're going to be in 3D Earth, usually the cooperation and the unity is lacking. That's why all this stuff is in scramble codes, because, and same thing with the imbalance of the masculine and feminine. It is junk, because if we don't have those things going for us, we can't really switch those other strands on, because we're in the personality matrix. We're concerned about status, we're concerned about labels, we're concerned about what kind of money's in the bank, and all these other things that a lot of us let go of. So I'm not saying this is anything that any of us really need to, have that much attention on, but we look around and it's pretty obvious. I mean, I don't have a TV, but every time we're in a hotel, it's like, yeah, see what's on the television. And it's just like shocking. It's like shocking. It's like nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. Same medications that will absolutely kill you to try and like cure a migraine. Just same old stuff. And yeah, so personality matrix, and mostly it comes through the television to kind of keep us in that personality matrix. And there's positive aspects to it, of course, and there's a lot of positive things. You go to an airport, you can get organic snacks. I mean, things are changing for the better. You notice little things that are taking a bit of a step up, and some things that really aren't. But the availability of good food and nutrition is way greater than it's ever been, which is a really good thing, even though they try and stop it. I mean, just going to an expo and walking around, going into any health food store, really knowing your stuff and your herbs, it's like, that wasn't so easy in the past. So that begins to open us up. And when we can move beyond the 3D, we go into the soul matrix. Well, a lot of us are already there. So we can be around a crowd of people, and somebody might be vibrating at the avatar matrix, and they might, struggle being in their body. And so they might attract more grounded people, and then they put their heads together and they help each other. We all have our astro charts and the things that we are generally well-versed in or feel an affinity to, but sometimes we need that opposite, or we need that complement, or somebody that gives us parts of ourselves that we may be missing, because we're sort of in the puzzle piece stage of the game where, we share codes, we share, energies together to be able to rebuild our DNA architecture. And so we all carry little bits. Some are very grounded in the personality matrix, but they're very open-minded. And so they might hang out with somebody who can't be in their body at all and is up there like, whoo, and then it's like, whoo, and then they're able to join forces and start to, work together. And so the synchronicities of people coming together is really cool in that sense. And when I do charts, that's a lot of what I discover when I look at charts, and especially when I put two charts together. You can have somebody who has really difficult aspects, but they meet the right person and it almost erases it, helps them to work through it, gives them the peace that they might need. And so that's the beauty of the thing about synchronicities, and not wasting your time out of convenience, out of the need for companionship, or giving one's power away because they don't think anybody else exists. We definitely will always attract what we need in order to rebuild and to recover and to rehabilitate. That is just a given rule. Just like when we cut ourselves, our body automatically has a response and wants to heal it. We don't have to command it, but some things are a little bit harder, and we need to take better care of it so it doesn't get infected. So we were born into a gaping wound that is on the verge of either becoming a massive infection that's going to rely heavily on technology to keep it from going under, or we're a part of this, incredible healing of this huge gaping wound, which is really the separation of true love, metaphorically, literally, and inwardly. So the soul matrix is very often like a soulmate, soul connection, soul family. Here we are. We're totally vibing in like a soul matrix, all of us here together. But this is also where reptilian invasion happened, and so we're a little bit still vulnerable. We're overcoming all that. So when we begin to heal all this, we revisit a lot of the galactic stuff, the stuff that we've been through. But the way, when we recover from it, we don't have to repeat it because we've recovered. And same thing with the immune system. It doesn't tend to repeat certain strains that it's overcome. It builds an immunity. So we revisit these things through rebuilding all this stuff. And so for some people, it's horrifying to have to relive some of those galactic memories. For others, they'll get the transmission, they'll get the activation. They might not remember, they might not have been there. But for some, it's just like, spiritual path is like not fluffy and fun. 5D asteroid belt, we're integrating a lot of fragments from these exploded planets that took place. When we get our voices back, in a sense, we're like integrating into connecting the higher and lower self. And we don't have to look at it, with all these different archetypes. But I work with the tarot and I see these archetypes, and, just really understanding that the zero, the fool card's where it gets fun, because the zero is almost all of them. And what does the zero do? The zero is the fool. It doesn't mind just the laughter. It can fall down and get back up again without any judgment. It has the ability to connect with all these other archetypes, but it's in the nothing land. It's in the now. It's just in the flow. And when we lose the flow, we have all these other personas in order to create some level of correction. You know, we need the high priestess to have the direct connect with our intuition. We need the magician to have a voice to create synchronicities. You know, we need the Hierophant to be able to be grounded and have some level of structure. But once we like really figure out and integrate it all, we just bloop into the Fool. And we all have like at least a portion of our day where we're fools. But I think we should be fools more often. So hence the really twisted sense of humor I have sometimes, because I'm just trying to maintain fluidity and levity. Because, man, if we take this all too seriously, it can get really difficult. So the monad matrix, Gaia, Orion wars influenced and digressed it, 7, 8, and 9. When we look at it in our chakra system, it's an infinity spiral, very hard to activate because that will begin to help our physical body shift into a higher density. And that might not be possible for all of us as we start to move into greater levels. But it doesn't matter if our consciousness is there. It really doesn't matter. It's really just about consciousness. The physical will always match the consciousness, but how that looks, nobody can really predict. And how that works for each of us individually, is a bit of a mystery. And then we get back to the avatar matrix, which we visit quite often. We have those moments, some through meditation, some through, just kind of walking around and just feeling the lightness. Nature's the greatest activator to me, but that's just me. If I just want to just really feel the fullness of it all, I just pay attention to the bird or a butterfly or the leaves and just the intricacy of like whatever's going on in nature, because to me that's medicine. It's just like, okay, I'm seeing this, it's a reflection, and it's helping me to be in the now, and it's just taking me away from this personality matrix, this human realm. And the beauty is that this whole thing going 13, 14, 15, the universal mind matrix where life was seeded from, the 13 has come into this planet. So it's actually the true vibration of this planetary body is a 13D monadic core. And so when we talk about an ascending planet, it's taking us into the 13, which is actually representative of the 0 point in the neutron window that's connecting us back to Andromeda. So this Earth isn't just your typical Earth. It's like there's crazy stuff going on here. And the 13 was not able to be anchored into the planet until recently, which is what I'm going to get into here with the Venus transits and how this energy dropped back in and some evidence behind the fact that this actually did happen. So 14, 15, if we look at the Trinity, 13 would be mother, 15 father, 14 daughter, son. So it's just this, and it reconnects us with that too, because obviously the mother has the father and the daughter and son, every gender. So we live, again, take it or leave it, in a 15-dimensional time matrix, and our true 12 DNA template corresponds with this. Our DNA is broken up into different harmonic universes. When we embody the 12-strand, we've actually helped to heal galactic wars. We've helped to rebuild the fallen systems and advance civilizations, and we've learned the right use of power, and hopefully we won't make the same mistakes again, or else, yeah, we might keep looping. Some people have learned the lessons, won't keep looping. But as long as the necessity is there, people more than likely will still experience it. So this is what is great about this window period. And so just to kind of hone in a little bit, the 13 is the founder A1, collective body, no time. It's the mother arc, feline Elohim, genetic base, chakra 12 inches beneath feet, open 13th gate to Aurora families, ascension timeline. But look, 13 is the universal earth core, aquamarine. So it's the core of the earth. It morphed into the physical planet thousands and thousands of years ago. Then 14 is more avian, seraphim, genetic base, and where the chakras are. So it's wisdom, love, and power. And then the magenta is, the father energy, that the father arc, which is very different than the lower creator gods and this disconnect from the father energy. So through the mother, we get to heal with the father. Because the reason the mother is kind of in the forefront is because these darker entities and beings knew that the nurturing love and unconditional love of the mother would help return her children home. So what better to target than the mother and the Mother Earth? Because it's not just a being, it's not a being, it's the planetary consciousness. And it's something that we all hold within ourselves. We can be our own divine parent. And it's something that we experience with one another, right? Have you ever felt like, will you just adopt me? Like I was like that when I was young. Like, I can just feel the divine mother energy in you. Will you please, can I? They're like, okay, I already have a few kids. I'm like, okay, it's fine. But anyway, we feel that come through ourselves, and we are that for each other very often. When the best of ourselves comes through, we can hold, these energies and light up these chakras without realizing it. And then we just, then we wake up and it's just like, oh yeah, 3D reality, and we kind of lose it, and And then, so it's really hard to maintain, but every single one of us has that connection. And this whole kind of chosen one thing is a bunch of BS. And it's just, to me, the chosen one is love, power, wisdom, all three together. When we can embody that, then we are the advanced race. And our responsibility is to help activate each other, not have a hierarchical system, not get power hungry about it, not have a spiritual arrogance about it, but really, look to help switch it on for everybody else, because we all have this. And it's a part of this earth. It's a part of, what's beyond this earth. So when we really connect into that galactic core, we're connecting back to that full, trinity, which are chakras actually that we're connected to, that our DNA can connect to, which will actually protect us from the wars that we went through in Lyra. Because when it was 12-strand fully, we had kind of lost connection through manipulation and hybridization from this, Trinity. And religion has kind of made it difficult as well, making it only like Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And Holy Spirit, it's like, let's not even like give it a gender. And the feminine has just been thrown out. So anyway, the destruction of advanced civilizations and sacred union, because when Tiamat existed, it was in perfect balance with Apsu as far as mythology is concerned, caused Tara, dimensions 4, 5, and 6, to actually fall into dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Everything drastically changed. More planets came into the picture. Both Tara and Tiamat exploded, and it took thousands of years for the split to occur. And so 2 pieces of Tiamat became Earth and Maldek. And then we sank down into this lower harmonic universe. The planets were different. Maldek and the Earth were then the counterpart of the masculine and feminine. And again, this is what my research has shown. This is what feels right to me. But however it makes sense for you is the truth that's important for you to own within yourself, of course. But collapsing into this lower harmonic universe changed the whole tree of life. So when we look at the tree of knowledge and the duality, well, the tree of life is a template of our DNA. So all of a sudden, it's the tree of knowledge, the tree of good and evil. And that got targeted with mind control. So instead of gaining any knowledge, we ended up with systems outside of us that dictated to us what to believe, what to think. And based on where you were raised and who raised you, would influence your belief systems. That would be different than the neighboring country or the neighboring person down the road, or all this sort of separation. And diversity is important, of course, but when it's not in harmony, it just creates chaos. And so it reinforces the junk DNA and us staying in this duality of like good and evil and knowledge. To overcome the tree of knowledge is to gain self-knowledge, though, and to know what we're really made of. And are we taught that? Do we ever go to school and like, let's learn about ourselves, and let's learn about soul alchemy and some of these ancient teachings that were burnt up and destroyed, and all these, wisdom keepers that were persecuted and annihilated. Let's learn about those guys. No, we'll get false history, and you got to sit still, or we're going to put you on meds. So it's like, I'm not going to school, sorry. And it's just like, get a bunch of phone calls, we're really worried about your daughter. It's like, whatever, I'm out of here. So anyway, so we separated from the 7 higher heavens and have been locked into the 7 chakra system and patriarchy, blocked from accessing the bridge to the rest of ourselves and unity consciousness. Our 7th chakras have been implanted, and spiritual knowledge has been distorted. Now, the crown chakra is very important, of course. But when we start to go into that zone and we start to experience more and it takes us somewhere, usually that's when we get slammed and psychically attacked. So we don't tend to want to go there. We either feel like we're failing on our spiritual path, and so we just sort of maybe get cynical or give up, or we just limit ourselves to whatever belief system is holding us kind of in stasis. And sometimes that can lead to stagnation if you have one of those adventurous spirits and want to go further. So anyway, Tiamat's explosion and Maldek's explosion in 3D solar system, because they're both counterparts of each other. One created the 5D astral belt, Maldek created the 3D. And this destruction is the reason our 3D planet has an artificial satellite, which is our moon. And that's obviously a whole nother thing to get into. And it was really great to hear what Brad, or channeling Adranas, had to say about that. I don't know if you guys went, but anyway, from Ascension Glossary, Lisa Renee, the female consciousness of the planet Tiamat was Sophionic. So when we look at the Christ Sophia, the Sophia represents the feminine. So when she exploded, her consciousness descended into a collective form body, which is known as the Akamoth. Akamoth is named for the wounded goddess' fragmented body parts, which were collected and trapped by the negative alien agenda and fallen angelics in the 2D underworld of the planetary body to incubate or impregnate archonic creations. So when we look at like, satanic ritual abuse and the Baphomet and all that kind of stuff, it is harnessing the fragmented trauma of this exploded planet, which was Sophionic, because it was the expression of the original unity of the masculine and feminine. When that exploded and it got fragmented, it was very easy for this power, these dark forces to overlay its control. So the fall is the result of excessive misuse of free will choice that eventually jeopardized the eternal life expression and continued existence of cosmic order. Like humans and other biological individuals, planets and galaxies also have a soul matrix of which we're all a part of. We are connected to the planetary consciousness and all the planets. So why has it been so hard to wake up? Because we've experienced that trauma. We're fragmented. Because when those things exploded, a part of us sort of exploded. So when we look at like picking up our pieces or soul retrieval, we're doing it on a really massive scale. And even when we do it just for ourselves, we have to know that we're doing it on a much larger scale. The micro and macro are so interconnected. So the time matrix is the energy distribution system which carries life force energy from source into the dimensional layers of which the soul matrix is a part. When an individual, a planet, or a galaxy is blown out of the grid of its soul matrix, which directly connects it to the time matrix and thus perpetual energy supply, its energy and its evolutionary potentials become limited or bound. The way the planet Saturn has changed over time represents this. So tomorrow I'm going to be talking a lot more about Saturn. Adronis brought up the fact that it used to be a sun, and so the whole history of Saturn connected to the fact that it used to be a sun, it's basically become like the lead. And so when we think of alchemy, we're turning the lead of Saturn into gold by raising our vibration in terms of how we relate to Saturn. So the lower level of Saturn is control, and it works with the moon to keep us in this sort of patriarchy control system. When we work with Saturn enough and go through the trials and tribulations and stand our ground and say, wait a second, I don't have to do that. I don't have to be repressed. Then Saturn becomes teacher-master. We end up being able to teach others, and we become a mastery over these lower forces, which is still ruled by Saturn. It's just no longer binding us and enslaving us. And so we have to master these lower shadow sides of any planet. Like Neptune, the shadow side of Neptune is like addiction and illusion and self-undoing. But the higher level of Neptune is the creative imagination and being aware of our multidimensional selves. So if we're not able to express that, like say growing up, our parents shut us down, like we don't want to hear your dreams and your creative imagination, then it can really turn into a nightmare, and we can haunt ourselves with our own imaginations because we've been cut off. So it's very interesting to see these in people's charts, like how do they relate to Saturn? How are they relating to these different planets? And to help them kind of find that higher expression of it to overcome the detrimental effects that it can have on the physical body. So the 12 planets entering Harmonic Universe 1 after we sank are the planets of our local solar system: Mercury, Venus, 3D Earth, which is actually a 13-dimensional Earth, Mars, Maldek, which ended up imploding, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and Nibiru. That's kind of a confusing one that I don't even really want to try and our Sun. This changed our DNA, and the Anunnaki tinker with our DNA so that we wouldn't advance very quickly. Not all Anunnaki. The planet was seeded with the 13D monadic core, though, but it wasn't able to stay anchored in the physical planet because of all the wars. So if you've been through enough trauma and hell in your life, it's very hard to be in your physical body. Just wake up and be like, woo! So kind of same thing with the planetary body, and that's part of the game being played is let's traumatize the planetary body because it is a consciousness, so it cannot be here for the humans that are being born, because the mother energy is going to nurture these souls and help them to return home and reconnect with the rest. And so certain factions of the Anunnaki, the fallen races and groups that wanted to have control through the misuse of free will and becoming this predator force and working with predator entities and beings, we came in here. I'll get there in a second, but other versions, like the Nag Hammadi says, she morphed from a pure energetic state, stellar plasma, into the material body of the Earth. Hence, her story describes the origins of the Earth. So this particular Earth body had the 13th gate, the 13th mother arc, morph into the physical planet to help souls that were being born here after those cataclysms and the collapsing of the lower, the Taurus system and Tiamat, and Maldek explosion, to really help us to recover. But a part of her had to recover too. And a part of her being has been traumatized. That's why we hear a lot of mythologies of the goddess in the underworld all the time. It's like, why the hell is the goddess in the underworld all the time? And what the hell is up with Hades? And all these things. And she's just like in there, eating pomegranates? Like, it took me a long time to be able to eat a pomegranate. I'm like, I don't know about that. And then I read the property, anti-inflammatory, okay, antioxidant. Well, it's already too late. We've already eaten enough pomegranates, and we're just going to have to keep this underworld thing going until we gain mastery over these dark lords that have created this duality and have literally imprisoned the feminine within all of us, men and women. That's why men have a hard time with their feminine side, and women are just almost insane sometimes, right? Aren't we a little insane? I mean, I totally am. I have to apologize to him like all the time. I'm like, I'm sorry, I know it's me. But anyway, and that's the whole moon thing, and Dronis was talking about it, like by like 2024, 25, the moon will not have the influence it has over us right now. But until then, we just have to be loving and compassionate with one another. So as a new world was forming, the Sophia energy morphed into the physical planet and could barely survive this intervention, and to become an ascending planet and to help activate our higher codes, as she was being subjected to all the horrors of these beings who chose to abuse free will. This is all our inner feminine, right? The 13D monadic core, the mother arc connecting us to the Godhead, is what this represents. And it's an ascending planet that's been under attack. Other beings from other universes came to assist, and there was also the seeding of the angelic human lines on Earth. So when we look at the other, entities and beings, they're like refugees from these exploded planets. But a lot of us are refugees from exploding planets. We all have that kind of history. The difference between a dark force refugee is one that is almost alien and creating an alien system, whereas others are just like a lost starseed, like, what am I doing here? This doesn't feel right. So there's a difference with the kind of mentality that we're dealing with. So the seedings of the root races on this planet have been to reassemble the original DNA and reclaim that which was lost in the Lyran Wars with the Orion group. So there's always a good reason behind things, but then there's always something that wants to make it really, really difficult for us to achieve what was necessary in a lot of ways. If all these wars and explosions happened and negative ego constructs were created that manipulated us and took us away from source, then we have a chance to rebuild this. But we're taken advantage of because of amnesia. Because of this density, it being so low, we lost connection with our galactic memories. So the receding of life on Earth, we got the 12 tribes that are linked to the stargates on Earth, which link to the 12 planets and the 12 dimensional levels of the universal time matrix, broken down into 7 root races, some who were seated on Gaia. That collapsed with the electrical wars, that's a whole other thing, and almost destroyed everything. There were other seedings connected to Egypt and different technologies and different interventions, but that goes on and on. But the root races, Polaris, Hyperborea, Gaia, that realm didn't last. Then the Lemurians and Atlanteans, and actually Tara, there was the original Atlantean Lemurian thing, and that all exploded. But this could go on and on. But 5 cloister races also came in who could assist the lost souls through linking their consciousness to them. Otherwise, they'd be stuck in time forever. The cloister races carried the whole 12-strand DNA package, and cloister races are considered the guardians. The sphere made this an ascension planet, which is the mother arc, and the goal was to reconnect the morphogenetic fields of the 12 planets back to Tara. This is how to ascend into the higher earth energies. The 5 cloister races, to me, are very similar to the 5 points of the pentagram because they help to correct the reversals. If we look at the 10-strand DNA reversal currents, it's also shown in the symbology of the inverted pentagram, where the ether, the 5th element, is going into the ground. And it's okay to go into the ground and come back up again, but if you don't come back up again, physicality in the personality matrix holds dominion over spirit, and spirit's suppressed, and we have no access. So the ether has actually been lost from us for quite some time. So cloister races, again, like to develop each slide to the degree that I would love to would just be a lot of time. But the warring energy, after we dropped in density, ended up influencing the masculine beyond its former protective role, which Maldek held before it got infiltrated. It originally was so protective that it covered the feminine earth energy that was so prevalent during the root races of Atlantis and Lemuria. And that is when the Anunnaki came in and influenced it into a more patriarchal system that became incredibly destructive with the influence of the draconian energies. This eventually led to the destruction of Atlantis and Lemuria, which are the root races, different than the original ones, but root races have to do with sharing codes. That's why there's mass genocide. If there's genocide and they wipe out a race that holds specific codes and they can't share it with the rest of us, then we're almost crippled. But we can override anything if we can understand the true story enough. But we're given like these false histories. We don't really understand the nature behind some of these wars and how it relates to the Stargates and this and that. So since the Nephilim Wars, the Nibiru, Anunnaki resistance, and patriarchal Melchizedek factions decided to take over Inner Earth. The Melchizedeks were supposed to be the guardian hosts of the Ascension timeline, and that shifted in 2009, 2010. And it just kind of got screwed up. The Melchizedek obviously are very, very high race that we're all connected to. So infiltration and falling in density and consciousness is just, we're all vulnerable the minute we come into human form. So it's not taking away the higher aspects, of course. Anyway, several power generators exploded, ripped apart the surface continents of the Earth. The planet Earth tilted on its axis, which damaged all the planetary gates, grid networks, portals, and stargates on the planet. All the pyramids and ET technology disconnected and went offline. Flooding and cataclysms destroyed the Atlantean colonies and much of the Earth's surface. So it's just war, 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 trauma, trauma, trauma. And now that all this is being controlled, the planetary gates and the grids and the portals and the stargates are us. So if that's all being controlled and damaged, we're born into something that automatically is gripping us and blocking us and taking hold of our DNA, scrambling the fire codes, blocking us from being able to access these chakras, because we are like a reflection of all of this. And so because we can't just necessarily go in there and like heal it with our hands, you know, it's like, okay, what do? We go to all these stargates and dig into the ground and get rid of the Nephilim reversal grids. It's like, no, we counteract it with our frequency, with our voice, with our refusal to allow this mind control to be prevalent in our lives. We push the envelope by loving more boldly, more deeply, and being more genuine and more real, and screw everybody else who has a problem with it, because they're in some sort of weird thing. And we're doing them a favor the more we can step out of it. So during the Atlantean cataclysm about 30,000 years ago, this is when the stargates, the grids, and ley lines became controlled by negative alien races, such as the reptilians, the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, the Alpha Draconis Orion group, the Zetas, the Greys, and also some Nordics. Much distortions and attacks on the goddess energy for bringing higher spiritual intentions to Earth, and for the blue ray and certain souls coming in to incarnate as guardians of the organic ascension timeline. This faction decided, though, that they would maintain a presence on the Earth as stewards for the eventual day when humanity would move beyond the Anunnaki DNA programming. The Sophia energy on Earth was able to create women of fire made in her own image, and that is what led to the persecution of all pure embodiments of the divine feminine. Every single person has this within them, though. So when we look at the persecution, the trauma that we've all been inflicted we're like the end result of that. In recovery. A lot of us, we're just all in recovery. So anyway, does that look like a happy relationship? No. It's like, there's that guy again, dragging her down into the underworld. So exile of the divine feminine, the false king of tyranny archetypes. And I look at it like a bad step-parent or a bad partner. And that separates us from nature. It's like we've lost the mother. She's being dragged into the underworld. And then what have we been left with? The program version of the male and female, where this guy is propped up as being some sort of protector, some sort of controller, but it's all for, you know, our own good. And the feminine feels victimized, feels disempowered. But the thing is, it's not about genders as much as the energy circulation within our own body. I know plenty of men that identify more with their own feminine being exiled, and women that are running really, really negative power energy that seems very patriarchal at times. So we see this gender confusion as well right now, because as we're trying to heal all of this, there's always going to be something that tries to take advantage of what's important. The whole deal is that this is within us. There's a part of us that has been locked away and hidden, and there's this negative ego that has been, you know, amplifying itself into the world with the need for certain things to maintain some level of control, which is very much the Saturn program. So it doesn't matter what the gender is, it's what we need to reconcile within ourselves because of the programming, and we all respond to the programming in a different way. Not one person, it's not like across the board we're all programmed in the same way. It really depends on who the person is. So anyway, there was an aggressive campaign to target and kill the original Christ Templars in an attempt to extinguish all records of the Essenes, Law of One, the Christ Sophia, the Mother Ark as the Holy Spirit, and the feminine principles' equal role to access Christ consciousness as the true wisdom and spiritual knowledge of our universe. And again, Lisa Renee, amazing information, bringing all this in. And I just really, you know, resonate with it and always kind of bump into her stuff when I do this kind of research. So the current world is almost, like I said before, like a big wound that is still connected to the healing light of Source. Just like our immune system, no matter what injury or illness, The immune system, parasites, and germs are in battle mode, and until we can align with the side that can heal it, we are going to remain in an infection that is hanging on the cusp of getting replaced with something artificial. And that's always breathing down our neck. And that's only something that we choose when we've lost touch with ourselves, when we don't choose ourselves, when we think, oh, well, to have a utopian future or to have like our needs met, we need to agree with this. It's like we're the advanced technology. We haven't even begun to recognize all that we're made of. And it's not as complicated to uncover as we think, because it's already happening on a cosmic and earthly level. We're in a position right now in the cosmos where the earth and where these alignments are making it very easy for us to be in touch with this. We just have to really get out of the way of ourselves. And we have to just really pay attention to how we're feeling on any given day. What is the health, how do we feel like inside of ourselves? How are we relating to other people? You know, what things are showing up and making itself obvious that needs fixing and healing? And all the information we could possibly need, we can uncover in a single day or a week of just paying attention. I often have clients just write down all your triggers, whether they're good or bad, because those things are coming up for a reason. We tend to shove them back down. And the thing is, you know, just being compliant and having, you know, the bully mentality of, oh, you know, you're going to be in trouble, or, you know, this is against the law if you do this or do that. But all of it is starting to fizzle out because they cannot stop, and they did not stop the mother energy from being anchored back into the planet. So when people are like, nothing really happened in 2012, nothing's really happening, it's like, it's really good that no news is good news in this particular situation, because obviously it's not going to happen overnight. It would blow our cells out. You know, we wouldn't be able to handle such a rapid shift right away. And it's, you know, very alchemical, and everybody's on, you know, their own personal journey as far as how that goes. But anyway, after all these cataclysms, the planet Earth tilted on its axis. I said that, yeah, it damaged all that stuff. But when the Sumerian Egyptian invasion began, this event unplugged human DNA and scrambled the fire letters in the geometric codes in the planetary morphogenetic fields, which blocked higher sensory perception and thus blocked multidimensional perception of other timelines and extra-dimensional races. So that's kind of, you know, then we're dealing with Anunnaki as creator gods of humanity, patriarchal domination, and enslavement agenda for Earth humans. You know, the beginnings of like the hidden shadow government. About 5,500 years ago, the ripped a 5D wormhole into Saqqara, Egypt, rewrote human history. 5,500 years, a time of invasion with earliest written records of the Sumerian tablets. And final setback, no communication with Christos races, with genetic manipulation and installed frequency fences. And so seals were put in our DNA to quarantine us so that we wouldn't contaminate the higher realms, which was for our own good. But then frequency fences were put in so that we wouldn't even have the capacity to wake up when the time was right, which is around right now. And that's why we run into a lot of interference all the time when we're trying to, you know, expand and ascend. And so we have to, you know, be very, very careful and discerning of people that are running into traps and making agreements that are negative, that are not looking out for the best interests of community. And that's why it's so important that we learn to fall back on ourselves more and learn to trust ourselves more and the connection that we have that is just waiting for us to switch it on. So according to my research, the 13th blue ray was previously under the control of the Melchizedek hosting of our planet. They became fallen and patriarchal and were highly manipulated by the Orion group. So a lot of sacred names and a lot of things have imposters behind it. And so those that were kind of in worship of these things didn't realize that imposters were standing behind it and manipulating the books, the texts, and the way the information was shared, and they got more and more, they digressed more and more, but a lot of them had good intentions and were just following what they thought. And that's another danger of following anything. They second-guessed maybe their deeper intuition. The whole Sophia energy went out the window. I mean, that's not a name you hear very often. It came to me when I was younger, and I was like, what is this? I always had a connection with the Magdalene energy just because that was my middle name that I was given, but it was just like, Sophia's very familiar, but no, like that's just like gone. And all this demonization, even of Lilith. And people still demonize Lilith. And it's like, sure, she was pissed off and probably birthed a bunch of demons at the Red Sea because she did not want to lay down with that Adam guy because it was like not the first seeding. And he was being very dominant. And she was just like, no. She was connected with Tiamat and the dragon lines, right? And no, she's a succubus and this and that. I think she's just a very pissed off aspect of the goddess, but we need to reintegrate her as well. And Lee McCloskey, who I'll be interviewing, is an artist who lives in Malibu, and he's painted the whole mythology of all of this, and I'll be interviewing him. And he was an actor on Dallas when I lived in England with my granny. When we watched, he was Mitch Cooper on Dallas, right, a soap star. And I go to his house, and it's like, I mean, he painted the floors, the ceiling, the bookshelf, everything, the whole mythology of the goddess and the Christ energy. And it is spot on and unbelievable and such a humble, amazing person. Anyway, so since the Sumerian Egypt invasion, the Mother Ark, aqua blue ray, was not in the Earth core anymore. Even though it morphed in, it could not remain. Hence, the Earth had lost her Mother of God and female Christ Sophionic body principle. And that theft that humans have experienced has been absolutely traumatizing, but it's been covered up and masked with this control matrix that has addicted people to things to fill that void. And that's why it's so easy for people to get addicted to things, because it's like, you know, we've lost our mother. It's bad enough to survive the biological parents that we were born into, not to say anything negative about anybody's family or my own, but what we see passed down generation to generation is traumatizing personally, let alone the fact that we lost connection to our mother, and everything was in this dark reversal stuff. That's why we've had thousands of years of dark history, lots of world wars, lots of trauma, total imbalance of the masculine and feminine, and we've seen the Earth go into a lot of digression as far as her elementals. So as a result of the human body and human consciousness being such an abundant supply of potential energy and kinetic energy, the negative alien agenda have found many parasitic methods in which to harvest this collective energy for their benefit to the detriment of humanity. So if we've lost, you know, that sense of mother, and we're just doing everything we can to feed that void, guess who's stealing that energy from us? Well, the negative alien critters, parasites, parasitic, vampiric, and it's worked with our governments. It's infiltrated pretty much everything that seeks to create dependency and following and worship and anything to just steal and steal and steal, because that's what it lives on. It compromises DNA, and instead of being able to connect with 0-point unified field, it plugs into us because it lost that connection. And it could reconnect if it wanted to, but in order to trick the death, they jump timelines, they implement, you know, time travel and all these different technologies to cheat the death process so they don't have to. And so that their life cycle is technology, AI, transhumanism, and we're the food source. And that's what we're stopping right here and right now. So humans and the earth body have an incredible supply of many forms of potential energy that are being collected through bio-spiritual harvesting methods. These methods are found in many standard practices that are socially accepted because most people are completely unaware of the damage this generates into the electromagnetic field of human beings, both in the physical body and the spiritual body. There's something called the Nephilim reversal grid technology. It's a massively complicated alien structure that has interfered with true spiritual marriage, or Hieros Gamos, as a possibility for human beings on the planet. There's also something called the Nibirian Diotic Crystal. It's another negative ET technology control network. This affects the grids and have been placed in sacred sites such as Stonehenge. So they unplug the Cathar and Albion body, which is the masculine and feminine, and so the circulation of the planetary grids aren't even able to help us to heal our DNA, so we have to kind of override that. And this is all, you know, the reversal stuff. So when we look at Hieros Gamos, that actually takes us into the avatar consciousness. That's why I look at it as a love story. To heal our DNA is to embrace authenticity and to seek true love. Not so much outside of the self, but within the self. True love with nature, true love with spirit, true love with the Christ, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. As long as it's got integrity and some level of purity and morality, or just care for just the earth it walks on and the other living beings around it. I mean, whatever. You know, some wouldn't consider such things. I'm not saying they're evil, but just our own reference point to override this, to understand what our DNA is really made of. It really is the union, and it goes through different stages. The 6 and 7 is alchemical marriage. When it starts to go in 8 and 9, it's called building of wings, or the 6 and 7 is building of wings. Then it goes in the monadic, then the hierogamic, and the avatar consciousness. So when people talk about twin flames, it's very much that own inner connection to your own divine light, which usually attracts somebody that can hold that with you. And a lot of people, I think, confuse people as being their twin flame. Maybe not, but I know it's very devastating because some people aren't ready and it doesn't work out, and it's like, my twin flame, he's being a jerk, he's cheating on me. It's like, maybe we shouldn't call him twin flame just yet. I don't know. Anyway, in both DNA and RNA, the mitochondrial DNA serves as a 5th principal element of cosmic ether, which is sourced only from the mother. So when we look at DNA, nucleic acids of DNA are connected to the elements. The 5th element is connected to the mitochondrial DNA, which is actually the quintessence, which has always been associated with the mother. So if we look at the inverted pentagram and that 5th element, and we realize that it's turning upright again in this ascension window, then that mitochondrial DNA damage is healed and we're not so addicted to the matrix stuff and the bait that is being put out. We start to feel nurtured from the inside out. We start to awaken that chakra of our own divine mother within ourselves. We hold that space for one another, the father energy too. And we're holding a greater guardianship for the planet, and we're holding a lot stronger presence for one another. And it's deeper and it's more meaningful and it's nurturing. Anyway, but thus the mitochondrial DNA that has been damaged though, with the mother energy being gone and the dodecahedron platonic solid being even manipulated, which represents the ether, all these reversals created a lot of damage, genetic damage, and humanity is grossly addicted to consuming everything in the external world to fill this void within ourselves. This is all healing now since the ether is now available. And I'm going to kind of jump ahead. When the sun started to move through the 13th sign of Fiacus, it's the only zodiac sign ruled by the ether. Every other zodiac sign is either earth, air, fire, water. So when the sun started to move through Ophiuchus in 2009, 2010, that's actually when the hosting of the Ascension timeline shifted over back to the mother, back to the consciousness of the mother, and the ether became available. That's why we can heal in ways that we haven't been able to for a really long time. That's why we're able to move into higher dimensional energies in ways that we haven't been able to for a long time. So a lot of masters had come in and incarnated, but they knew they couldn't do a whole lot until this window period, but dropped some teachings and plant some seeds because this window is, extraordinarily important. So now the ether is available, and it's just a matter of like really allowing it in. And it's not that we couldn't do it before, but it took a lot of extra effort to really like move past the politics and the religions and the family controls and all the damage of multi-generational abuse and the infiltration of certain bloodlines and how that branches off to other bloodlines and how it becomes a virus. So true spiritual marriage as a part of natural biological spiritual ascension was stolen from humanity through the negative alien invasion, and the pain of that theft and emotional abuse has damaged many people's hearts. So deep down, that's why I say, hey, we got to embrace things like sadness, depression, anger, and not deny these feelings and emotions because we have every right to have to move through that. How can we get to the other side without feeling it? Because to me, you have to feel it to heal it. And if we don't feel it to heal it, we suppress it, we medicate it, and it just throws off further off balance. That's why it's like, if it takes a couple months, so what? Just leave your job, go on food stamps. They're actually asking me to pay them back because they're like, we overpaid you food stamps way back in the... I'm like, clearly I was having money issues and you're telling me that I owe you now? It's like, but anyway, I did whatever it took just to get the heck away and just go through, whatever, just to move through that theft and that knowingness of the real hardcore pain that we all hold in our hearts. And we gotta move through it. So the third dimensional earth and its lower three frequencies are connected to the first, second, and third layer of our chakra system. When we only use these first three chakras, our consciousness is trapped in the lowest frequencies available in our body, and it keeps us locked into the 3D location of time and space, which creates this density, it creates this linear feeling, and all this kind of stuff. So I know these are cheesy pictures that I got on the internet, but if we look at okay, so it's like all these crazy mechanics going on behind the scenes, the grids being, impacted by negative technologies and all this crazy stuff with the reptilians and the stargates and all these blockages. But what does it look like on the world stage? Because we're not going to go into this deeper information. It kind of looks like this, like money and, ooh, let's just try and get his attention and like, no, where are you going? So I'm going to work and all your emotional nonsense, I don't want to listen to it. And just like, why don't you just be quiet and do what I say? And all this craziness. Okay, I know these are cheesy pictures, but this is kind of how it plays out. And we just have sort of adopted these personalities. I'm not saying any of us, but we see that in the world. We see it through advertising. We see it on the television. We see the promotion of this sort of stuff. Most of us haven't bought into it or we're recovering from it. Just this, whole sort of thing. And I know there's a lot more that I could have, chosen. I'm not trying to be kind of like a generalization, but that man could be a woman and the woman could be a man. It doesn't matter. The whole point is none of that looks balanced. And it's just basically like that picture we saw in that ancient art, of being dragged into the underworld. And it's like, this is the result. This is what it looks like as far as personalities playing out in the personality matrix, is everything is based on a programming. Nothing feels really, that authentic because of it. So in our first chakra, our survival needs and the way we relate to our current reality, so having survival needs amped up can be, really difficult. If we give our power away to it, or if we enable it through acting this way ourselves, we are plugged into artificial timelines and the matrix. The imbalance it creates is detrimental to our health and well-being. Unhealed memory trauma is the biggest root cause of disease. Sacred union needs to be anchored in our roots so that we can balance all systems and be on the organic ascension timeline. So this is how bad it gets. I mean, these are patented technologies from the CIA that are specifically created to create things like programming behavior and attitudes in the general population, effects, fatigue, mood swings, behavior dysfunction, and criminality. It's like Project MK Delta, Deep Sleep, 1960, CIA. And, they're just sitting there. They go to work and they just sit there and they figure this stuff out. Like, how do we patent this technology to create criminals? And in what way can we deliver this frequency to people? Oh, how about power lines, mattress spring coils, modulation of 60 hertz wiring? I don't know how much time I have left, but anyway, oh, really? Whew. Okay, thank God for tomorrow. But, she said I could go 2 hours, but I don't know. Well, I'll try and wrap this up here. But Project Phoenix, Montauk, 1983, USAF, NSA, description, electronic multi-directional targeting of self-population areas, frequency range, radar, microwaves, EHF, UHF, modulated with gigawatt. I mean, it's just purpose, loading of earth grids, planetary sonobulescence to stave off geological activity, specific point, earthquake creation, population programming for sensitized individuals. And so all these different patented technologies, crowd dispersion, you name it. So all these really advanced technologies are just out to just screw up our minds and make us like all over the place. And it's really nice because, at least if you're having a bad day, you can just, we don't want to blame it all on all of it, but every once in a while it's nice to pull that out of your pocket and be like, we need to get a new mattress. I don't know, it's like the spring coils are really making me a pain in the ass. But anyway, once a person becomes addicted to the bait that is presented in all forms of manipulation and deception, the architecture of this control systems hooks into you and takes your vital force. This is what feeds the technologies, and it also goes off planet. Our free energy has been used as a weapon against us. Different false archetypes are played out, and they're rewarded and encouraged in our society, but disclosure is coming from us. And our job is to recover from the assaults, the social engineering, and thousands of years of trauma. That's why each of us represents true disclosure. If we wait for anything outside of us, that is no different than giving our power away. That is no different than waiting for something outside of us to give us permission to say we're here and we're ready. Because we're here and ready right now. And all it takes is a little bit of self-compassion, a little bit of consciousness and self-reflection, and accountability and responsibility to be the best people that we can be. And it's okay that we slip and fall. That's what the Fool is for. And that's the zero energy. So right here and right now, we can connect to the highest of levels. And as we function in these human, whatever you call them, that is bound to slip and create errors because of what we're carrying and what we've been through, we can begin to teach it, how to stand in alignment. We can teach our ego to stand in alignment with spirit, with our soul, with all these different levels, because it goes personality, soul, monad, universal mind matrix. And we can just rebuild all of this in any given moment just by taking a deep breath, which I don't do when I talk, if you notice. And just, it's like a didgeridoo, but I can't play the didgeridoo. But anyway, the nanites and air, food, and water, they're just supercomputer system that sends waves of desires out right at the right moment, right as we're about to take a leap as a humanity. Usually there's some sort of false flag or event that happens, because it's in coordination with the media, scalar, and weather events and natural biological cycles. So there's a mass targeting, and we have to notice, those things act like a virus. When we hear something happen in the news, it just spreads, and we might be doing fine, then all of a sudden our energy just drops, and this sort of thing spreads. And it doesn't mean we should ignore it or not feel it, but we have to, be very cognizant of the fact that when we're really about to take a huge leap as a humanity, just like when we're, walking our individual paths, there's something that wants to come along and pull the carpet from underneath us. And so if it does that, we need to just get up as quickly as possible and do the repair work, and just know that we're able to do this from more clear seeing instead of just believing everything we hear in the news, and just know that, the targeting, take it as a twisted compliment, because we're really advanced souls, and something's picking on us big time to keep us from something truly magnificent that is really right under our nose. There's not any single one of us that doesn't have access to the fullness and wholeness of all that we're meant to be and all that we could be. We just have to really, understand. Just as much as what is intimacy? What is relationship? We need to understand. There needs to be communication. Well, the communication we're getting with the matrix is that we are targeted individuals, all of us, and we're helping to rebuild the system by not allowing ourselves to be a food source. We're divorcing ourselves from the imposter. We're embracing true love. So the world around us has no choice but to match back. And so we're going to see changes for the positive happen when we take that step within ourselves. And we're willing to purify our inner elements and go through the freaking underworld. And I just want to jump to the underworld. Wow, that's a long way away. So there we go. There is no antidepressant that will cure a depression that is spiritually based, for the malaise doesn't originate from brain dysfunction, but from an accurate response to the desecration of life. David R. Hawkins, Power versus Force. So going into the labyrinth, going into the underworld, the dark night of the soul, what might feel like hell, do not fear it. Sometimes we got to go there. It is a great way to deprogram ourselves. We've been taught to fear it. It's been ridiculed. It's been medicated. It's been looked at as something that just people would say, you're crazy. And some people, because of those projections, feel like they don't even want to be here anymore. That's the whole nature of suicidal thoughts. You're already going through a death rebirth cycle, so the death part is going to want you to join it, and so it makes people want to not be here anymore. But if we can just breathe through it and go through the whole process of that transformation and keep the physical body intact and come back, we have just cleaned the slate. We have healed a lot of the ancestral programs. We've allowed ourselves to go through the full metamorphosis. Now, if we're a caterpillar and we're in a cocoon and we're fighting against it, yeah, we're going to feel imprisoned. But if we understand, wait, just allow it and just be in it and don't worry. It's a mystery, but something beautiful is going to emerge. We can embrace the darkness. We can embrace our true divine power, because that is where we pick up the goddess from the underworld and we kick Hades out, kick him hard, move him out of the way, come back up to the surface, and begin to lift the veil, because that polarity is our fear of pulling these aspects out of the underworlds. And so going into the underworld is a great way to retrieve these things, and society has made it something to fear when it's an initiation. Initiations have been projected upon so that people go to the shrink, they go on medication when they're having a huge breakthrough or a huge download and they can't process it and their world's crumbling. It's just like, there's nobody around to really help. You're going to get projections, you're going to be ridiculed. And this is the most horrible thing, because these initiations are what are advancing us. And we've been taught to medicate it, fear it, judge it. And these are the moments where we're really growing, and we have a responsibility to each other to rehabilitate together and support one another, knowing that these changes are incredibly important. And no matter how mad or crazy it is, it's like when we throw up, we don't need to analyze, we just flush, flush. Stuff is just going to come out. The best thing that we can do is just like keep letting it go, So I can't believe you said this. I'm just purging. And so this allowance of this purging and to allow ourselves to get undone so that we can rebuild, is so important. But the best thing that we can do is be honest about it, because when we're not, we act out personality traits that can be very, very difficult for others. The more we can get comfortable with these initiations and at least admit that we're going through them, then we can at least understand one another without rubbing each other the wrong way, because we're afraid to show that, yeah, we're wounded, yeah, we need to heal, yeah, we need to go through transformations. That is the boldest and bravest thing that we can do right now as a humanity, is to not be afraid of these initiations, because we all have that kind of work to do. So I'm going to probably stop here, and tomorrow I'm going to continue with, I just want to give you guys a final finale though, because it's really important to know the 13th sign. Here's the crazy 8 spirals. This is, going from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's all the levels of sacred marriage. That is the mystery of our junk DNAs. Actually, it's union, and it affects our DNA. And I'm going to get into it in more detail tomorrow in my talk, and I'm going to make sure everything that I wasn't able to share, I will share. But it's correcting the reversals. It's allowing the spirit energy to come in. That circulation is a purifier of all the toxicity in our inner elements. And Venus, the planet, is proof that when the sun started to move through the 13th sign and the ether became available again, well, astronomers and astrologers noticed that the orbit of Venus has drawn a perfect pentagram and a sacred geometry of a rose. And over the course of thousands of years, the heart and the unconditional love of the mother, who was not in her planetary body for thousands of years, created this in the sky to eventually be able to open it up, heal the planet, and align it back with the galactic core to be able to drop back into the core of the planet. And now it's vibrating as a diamond heart, and it's activating all of us. So it's a time to really celebrate and connect and know that if you're willing to just drop whatever, and get out of the way of yourself and allow this healing and activation to take place, we're just going to like speed ahead, and we can all do this with the comfort of knowing that we can be kind and compassionate and supportive to each other. And let's, be honorable, and maybe trust is a lot for us to have towards one another, but at least let's, have compassion and hold space so we don't feel so isolated, and be, responsible to ourselves and live in integrity. I think that's the gateway for the rest of it all to fall into place. And this is another picture of the sacred geometry of what Venus is doing in the sky. And eventually the true template of our DNA and our blueprint is 13 spheres, reconnection with the mother. And when we can reconnect with the mother, we'll always be nurtured, we'll always be able to grow, and we'll always feel loved. And the whole nature of addiction to the matrix and giving our power away will cease, because we'll realize that everything we could possibly need is within ourselves. So